Hi, and welcome to a review of the new, or relatively new, or certainly new to me, ICM acrylic paint set. This is World War II Royal Air Force set. I guess they've obviously principally produced it to go with their Bristol Beaufort Mark 1 kit, although I'm sure this would be suitable for many other RAF World War II aircraft. You basically get the 5 paints plus a satin varnish. We've got a little bit of information on the side, a bit about ICM, obviously the paint call-outs here for the Beaufort, and then a little bit of bump on the side. Fairly standard stuff, really. Shake well before use. Paint is prepared for a brush. For the airbrush, dilute with water or thinner, a 40 to 60% ratio. Use primer when painting with airbrush. Colours can be mixed with each other. If ambient temperature is above 25 degrees C, use retarder. And also then it reiterates when applying from an airbrush, first use primer. Ideally, I think even if you're using a brush, you ideally want to use primer. They come in these sort of small screw top plastic bottles. You get an extra dark green, chocolate, dark grey. This is your varnish, satin varnish, gunmetal, and the blue grey. Just so you can see the size compared to a Tamiya bottle there. Tamiya's contain 10ml net, according to this, a third of an ounce. These are 12mm bottles. Again, I think what's on the side is pretty much the same as the box. It pretty much just says water-based acrylics for brush, for airbrush dilute 40 to 60%, and then obviously in various other languages. And there's a bit about the ICM. Let's open one up and have a look. Let's start. We'll try the dark green. I think that's probably a good place to start, isn't it? Now I'm suffering from a bit of a cold, so I'm going to do a quick sniff test. I can't really smell. There's a slight paint smell to it, but it doesn't seem to be strong. Obviously, I don't recommend you go around sniffing paint, but so what we'll do, we'll get ourselves a little stirrer here and just give it a quick stir up. You can see it's very, very thick, which in a way is good. So it means you can dilute it down to your own requirements, particularly for airbrushing, and it's going to make the paint go much further, so you should get a good value for money. In fact, these are quite respectably priced. I think I've seen them on a certain well-known model retailer's website for about £6.60 for a set, which for for 6 or 5 paints and a varnish, I think is really good value. I paid £8 for these with postage. That included postage, so I didn't think that was too bad. But yeah, we're giving it a good stir. Let's get a bit out of what we've got here. We've got some just regular sort of Humbrol brushes here. We've also got a little bit, should have got some water ready for this, but there is a tiny amount in here, he says. Might need to go and get some more in a second. We've also got some X20A Tamiya, which I thought I'd try with it as well. So trying not to waste too much of this paint, we get it off here and put some into the palette here. Yep, cripes. Yeah, it's quite a thick paint. We'll try initially just a drop, if we can, of X20. Maybe a couple of drops. 1, 2. See how that mixes. That seems to mix quite well. It's quite a rich, seems to be quite a good pigmented paint. personally look at fractionally. Even if I was going to brush paint, I think you'd want to thin these down. You certainly wouldn't want to put these on straight out the bottle. It would be far too thick. And even that with 3 drops I think of thinner is possibly a little thick, but let's give it a go. So here we go. I've got a bit of bare. This is just a bit of bare FX plastic. So we're going to just try and initially paint that on. I've gone quite thin here, depending on how quickly it dries. We'll put a second coat on. Now the first thing I will say here, and I'll show you what I mean in a second, is that's gone on quite nicely. I won't brush it too much, overbrush it. For a first coat, that's actually gone on quite well. And it's not, if you try, best way to show you this, I've got some Humbrol paint here. So I've got a bit of Humbrol paint here as well, just to give you an idea of what acrylic paints can be like on bare plastic. This has adhered to it quite well. It hasn't sort of, you get this sort of bits where it breaks up, the sort of tension. I'm not sure quite what the technical term is, but it doesn't sort of stick particularly well. Let's just clean that off. I am just going to very quickly pause the video and go and get some water, because I really should have been prepared and got some water. So give me a second, I'll be back in a moment. Okay, I'm back. I'm just going to wash that brush off. We will try a couple of the other colours in a moment as well. This isn't going to be necessarily a comparison against other paints, but just to kind of show you what, because this is, as far as I can tell, it's a pure acrylic. So we'll compare it to another sort of water-based. This is a Humbrol 129, just separated quite badly, but generally if you give them a good stir. They'll, yes, I think this came with the Skyhawk, so it's probably kind of light gold grey type colour. I'm going to take just a different clean brush here. This is actually quite thin in comparison to sometimes Humbrol can be quite thick. We'll just try a bit of this as a sort of comparison next to this. It's still drying here, but actually that's gone on quite well as well. Sometimes I find with a sort of Humbrol, it kind of bubbles up and doesn't adhere particularly well, and you have to do many brush strokes to kind of really work it in. But actually, it's a tiny bit of water. I think obviously this new Airfix plastic, this is actually from the 124 scale Spitfire. It's a spare bit that I don't need. They obviously don't use release agent on this because it's gone on quite well. So that's it going on to a piece of plastic unprimed. I've actually got some primed over here. This is a Spitfire Mark 1 Airfix. This has been pre-primed with grey primer. So we'll just do a little paint on there as well, see how that goes. Just remix that. And we'll just paint one of these wings. In this dark green. I'm not normally a brush painter. I try to airbrush everything as much as possible, so probably not doing a very good job of this, but it's probably a fairly good test of the paint. That's gone on quite well over the primer. I mean, like most brush painting, I've thinned it. You know, you should thin it down and do a couple of coats anyway. That seems to have gone on okay though. Just tidy that up a bit. We'll let that dry and then we'll give it another coat in a second. So that's our kind of first test. It seems to brush on quite nicely for a first coat. I think that's come out. I'm going to be a bit careful because that grey is still very much drying. Oh, have I got that in focus? Yep. So let's put that over to one side. Just put the popper back on that. What we will do is we'll also try this. So that was with X20A. We'll just try it with a bit of regular water and see if. I can't see it being any real difference, but let's have a try it, just see what it's like. Put some clean water into a pot here. And take a little water on the brush. Just mix that in. That certainly seems to have mixed fine with just regular tap water. And again, we'll just come in here. I probably got a bit too much on the brush actually. Yep. Really want to avoid. Go over there. But actually, in many ways, that seems to, I don't know, weird. It's almost gone on better just using the water rather than the X20A. Might be my imagination. Let's just try it once more on this piece of plastic here. Yeah, actually, interesting. Let's leave that now to dry. So that's the green. I'm not going to try every single one of these. I think we will just quickly take a look at, let's look at the blue-grey, and we'll also look at the gunmetal to see what that's like, what the metallic is like here. So let's try the gunmetal. Okay, looks pretty good so far. Big air bubble there. There's my stirry stick. Give that a really good stir. Again, it's equally as thick by the looks of things. Actually doesn't seem to have separated too much in the pot as far as I can tell. So that's let's clean off this brush here. Make sure that's properly clean. And we'll just take that off of there. I mean, it looks pretty good for a metallic. I know some acrylic metallics can be a bit odd. Certainly the Tamiya metals aren't that good, I don't think. Although the lacquer ones might be better than standard acrylic ones aren't. Again, we've watered that down this time just with a little bit of water. I'm just going to paint a little bit on the side of the fuselage here so we can take a look. What's gone on? Certainly coverage is good. Okay. Yeah, that's brush paints really nicely actually. Let's now leave that to dry. Pop the lid back on there. Clean off the brush. And then we'll just take a quick look at this paler colour and see how well this goes. Again, it looks really thick. stir up. In fact, that might be the thickest paint of them all, this one. Yeah, probably similar. So we give that a really good stir. Again, just use this brush just to take it off here, pop it in there. This is supposed to be blue-grey. Yep, I would say that's a blue-grey colour. Let's just wipe that off on there. Oh, I've managed to splatter some on there, I think, by the looks of things, but never mind. This is nearly dry here. This is the X20A, and this one at the back here is the one that's just using water. So what we'll do is we'll use a little bit of water in this again, just to thin it slightly. And then we'll just let's do this under here. And that goes on there. I'm just really slapping it on just so we can see. Coverage looks good though. I mean, this is primed plastic, but it seems to have gone on there quite well. Let's got to work out which way to put that for the minute so we don't muck anything. We've got a little bit of unprimed plastic here, so we'll put a bit on there. It certainly seems to have covered reasonably well, I would have said. Well, certainly as a brush paint, I think that's pretty good so far. Certainly it seems to go on quite well. Let's just get rid of that for a minute. Let's clean that brush off. Then what we'll do is we'll fire up the airbrush in a second, and we'll do a little bit of a test with the airbrush and see how it goes. Okay. We will. Let's try the green. We've got a bit of paint here, which I think we'll try and thin down. This is with the X20A. I would still say that's too thick for the airbrush. That's a better consistency, but even that might need a fraction more. Then we'll drop some of this in the airbrush. Press is already going. Haven't done anything yet. We'll do a little test. This is a Procon PS270, so it's a standard 0.2 needle. I can't tell exactly what the air pressure is, probably about 20 psi. I tend to just play around. I've actually got 2 Mac valves on this one, until I just find that it's, it sounds right and it sprays okay. So what we'll do here, Oh, I think I may have gone a little bit heavy on the... Yeah, it might have been a bit too thin. Yeah. Not overly convinced the way that's actually gone on. That might be my fault. I might have over-thinned it. It might be it just doesn't work as well with the X20A, actually. But I have actually gone a little heavy on this. So we should have... I got a bit carried away. But let's see how forgiving that is. Let's let it dry. And while it's drying, I'm just going to pause this. I'm just going to go and clean out the airbrush. And I'll be back in a second. Okay, I'm back. I've just cleaned out the airbrush with a bit of regular acrylic airbrush cleaner. I don't know if you can see... So this is still drying. Just going to move that over here. Move it over. I'm just going to put it out of camera shot for a second while it dries. I don't know if you can see the way. So this is with the Tamiya X20A. It's kind of almost starting to separate. Whereas this is just water. So it's obviously just drying, but it doesn't seem to be separating in the same way. So what we're going to do, we're going to do two things here. We're just going to give our original piece here a second coat and just see how well it goes. I think it's dry now. We'll just rehydrate this a little bit here. This is purely water again. And now is that the one? Actually, I think this. No, that was the. I got very confused now. But we're going to give it a second coat anyway, and just see how that goes. Would 2 coats be enough? Okay, we'll leave that to dry. And what we'll do here, then we're just going to try and airbrush a little bit of this one here that's purely been thinned with water. And bring our Spitfire back here. And I'm just going to do underneath here. Just to, I should have checked that first, shouldn't I? That's a bit silly of me. Always test your flow before you start spraying. In fact, I'm going to just knock that back a bit. Yeah, see now, I think I've made it slightly too thin. Let me thicken that a little bit with a bit of extra paint and we'll give that another go. So this is a bit of a knack to getting it to the right consistency. So we're just going to... It's not ideal to mix it this way, but in the cup. Okay, let's try that again. Definitely spraying a bit better now. Certainly no complaints with the way that's spraying. Can we do... yeah, get a bit of tip. Let's just make sure that tip's clean. In fact, what we'll do is we'll take the guard off here, just so we don't need to go clean. You do get a bit of paint drying on the tip by the looks of things. I don't know if you can see that, but probably not in shot, sorry. Can we do fairly small lines? But it's stopping and start. It does stop and start a little once you get going. Yeah, that actually airbrushes quite well. If anything, I'd say I think it's probably going to be a case of playing around with the consistency as a little bit. But I think actually in many ways I prefer the spray with just water rather than X20A, interestingly enough. I'm not sure if ICM do their own thinner. I did have a quick look online, but I couldn't find anything. So water seems to be better, but let's let it dry and we'll come back in a minute. Okay, I'm back again. I'm just going to try, out of curiosity, we're going to try a bit of the Mr. Colour Leveling thinners, just to see how it reacts. I have a suspicion I know what's going to happen, but I think it might be interesting just to see what this sort of lacquer type base thinner does to this type of paint. So we'll get a little, I'm going mad. Yeah. A bit of paint in there. Clean that brush off. Then we will get a little dropper here and put a couple of drops in there. And then I think I'm not going to use a brush just in case it clogs it all up. So as you can see, it is actually mixing eventually. It initially looks like it's not going to mix. It has seemed to have, it hasn't really thinned the paint though, but it has actually mixed in. It'll be interesting to see. Let's add a few more drops. Normally these sort of acrylic paints, quite often when you put this sort of lacquer thinners, it just goes like glue, but that's actually quite interesting. I mean, it is a bit cloggy, I suppose, the best way to but it does actually eventually thin and break down the paint. How well that would spray, see, it doesn't look quite right though. It kind of looks a bit bitty. Yeah, I don't think I'd want to try using. I think you probably could thin it and you could mix it and you probably could use it, but I wouldn't. I don't think. I could be wrong. What if it actually sprays quite well, but I'm not going to try that tonight. I may fiddle around with that another time, but I think probably avoid lacquer thinners in there. Okay, so let's do a quick look at what we've got here. This is brush painted, no primer. This was the one I gave the second coat to. This was actually the Humbrol Grey, which interestingly, as I say, went on better than I expected. It's often it doesn't adhere particularly well to the plastic, but that has actually gone on quite well. I think you'd need a third coat. I don't know how well the camera picks it up. I mean, it's not bad, but I think it would probably need a third coat to fully cover it. Maybe if it had been primed first, it wouldn't, but it certainly. But it dries really quickly. I mean, that really has only been about 10 minutes or so since I put that second coat on. This is the blue, and this was the one that was brush painted. with the Tamiya, I think. But I didn't, I didn't do a second coat, and I think actually it does seem to work better with water than the X20A, which surprised me. I thought the X20A would have worked well with it. It seems to be, it's certainly not going to rub off. Seems to have got really reasonably hardy paint. Then let's take a look at our Spitfire here. So we brush painted here again. If I give it a second or third coat, I think it would actually cover quite well. Certainly the initial coat has gone on quite well. I'm not particularly a brush painter, so that's gone on okay. This is the Tamiya thinned. It's a little bit patchier, but that might have been partly my airbrushing, but it certainly it's gone on better, but I don't think it's gone on as well as I thought it would. This is the metallic paint, the gunmetal. It's got a nice gunmetal for an acrylic, I suppose. It's not going to be as good as some of your lacquer-based acrylics. Lacquer-based metals, but it's for a brush paint, it's gone on okay. I think I'll put that on probably a little too thick. I'd have been better off to thin that slightly and then do another coat. We then got this bit here, which was brush painted with water rather than the X20A, which just seems to have gone on maybe slightly better than the brush painted with the X20A. The blue was brush painted. That's actually covered quite nicely for a single coat. Certainly, I think a second coat of that when you'd be looking good. And then this is the dark green that was sprayed on with just water thinner, and that actually to me looks better, I think, than this one. Obviously there's slightly different consistencies, and maybe a bit more playing. I'd learn I'd learn how to thin them slightly better, so this really is the first time I'm using them. I was able to get a reasonably thin line. Yeah, I mean, certainly cost wise, I mean, I like the little pots. You can have quite a large rack of these without taking up a massive amount of space. They're quite thick, so they'll thin down. You'll get quite good value for money, and they're fairly cheap to buy anyway. They seem to come out quite matte, I would say, looking at those. This is quite matte here. But obviously you've got your varnish for that. I mean, obviously all paint there's a certain amount of toxin in it if you were to drink it or eat it, so I certainly wouldn't recommend doing that. However, it doesn't seem to have a particularly strong smell, although, as I say, I've had a cold, so my sense of smell is a bit shot. So I would think for perhaps someone new to modelling, brush painting, this is probably a good choice. It's as I say, the value for money, I think it's good. You really can't complain for a set like that for £7. So for somebody's new, just getting used to the hobby, I think they'd be a good choice. I will be using them a bit more, just to see how they go. I'm going to probably actually build a model using them. I'm not sure what yet. Maybe this beaver, or something else I dig out of the stash. I'm not sure yet. Be interesting to see. Use it really in anger, and see how I get on with it. And then I'll come back to you and let you know how I find it. But yeah, I think it's a good basic acrylic paint. Good, I'd definitely recommend it for the beginner at this stage anyway. And for brush painting, it seems to work quite well. Anyway, cheers. Thanks for watching.